of even identification of your customers. When you push out installers, you have an issue of, okay, is Street Lagbaja really Street Lagbaja written there? So that KYC is another problem. That KYC is another problem. Because yes, Street Lagbaja is what is maybe in our billing system, but by the time you get there, you're seeing streets Ikoyi. And so since you have these installers that are coming from vendors going out, they may not necessarily know that. So that KYC of, because that issue is also there. And of course, you have the few naughty actions and all that, but it is minority in the whole scheme of things. Now, when we meter, it helps us because one, you're paying. I mean, you're already paying us up front for what you use, so it helps us. Now, of course, the other aspect which I think some discos that we need to pay attention to is when we meter. Now there's accountability of energy. That delta, we need to be thinking ahead. Because of course, when you meter at the injection substation and you have customers that are metered, you may have a delta.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do there? So that's where you need to start combing and understanding where there's leakages and all of that. That we need to put in place. But to your question, no, we actually want to meter. We really want to meter. And there are just some factors that are kind of slowing it down a bit. Some discos are ahead of others in terms of metering. But on average, we do want to meter. There's some issues. And the good thing about it now, we actually change meter vendors every 2-3 months. So by the regulators, they actually approve the meter vendors. Is it good short term? Yes. Long term, of course. I'm a risk thinker. So where people take advantage of processes and mechanisms in place. There can be issues there, but hopefully we'll actually put controls that would actually stop people taking advantage of having the same vendors or having vendors that we know cannot cannot perform. Because again, that's one of the things that we hold the carrot and stick. If you're not able to meet them, these customers that we've given you that you've collected money for, the next time that the bidding process comes up, your name is actually excluded. So it helps. That's helping right now. But we do have backlogs. I mean, not to say, ECO has some backlogs which we're working on, and I can imagine other discos have wider backlogs. But the intent is there, and hopefully action will meet up with intent to get everybody to see that we want to meter and we're metering.
Interesting.
Yes.
All right. I apologies for that tangent, but this is a conversation we've been having for a bit. Mo, just a quick question on technology. Revenue assurance was mentioned, and there's this number that we're talking about, 4 trillion, as being owed to Gencos and gas suppliers. And there's been some questions how valid that number is, and I'm not really getting into the specifics of the numbers. What I'm trying to query is what technologies are set in place to check and to measure what actually gets to the Genco and then what actually gets further down to the grid.
Again, I'm not an operator, so I would not be the best person to respond to that. I can just tell you about my own baseline knowledge. So I think there are meters that are put in place across the board, right? So even from the generating plant, there are meters that make you realize exactly how much power you're sending into the grid. In the true sense, I think on the transmission system, if you did have some sort of a communication SCADA system, you should be able to understand and read what is coming in and what is going out. I think on the distribution side of things, they also have some sort of metering that tells them what they're getting off the transmission system. In the perfect world, outside of AT&C losses or whatever you're putting in is what you're getting out. I mean, it's electricity, right? Everything you generate, apart from losses, you should receive on the other end. So there are technologies to be able to handle all of that. I think part of the problem consistently also is that the system is not necessarily as linked as you would like it to be. I think that gap in the SCADA, which is basically taking from the generators to the distributors, there's a lot of losses that come from that. on the distributing side, from what they receive to dispersing and everything, there's a lot of losses. So the ability to put the right sort of metering, the ability to have systems that can connect and communicate with one another, I think it's a non-starter for running an efficient power system. So there is technology that exists. Whether we're utilizing it and the right way, I think, is a different question.
Interesting. All right, let me go back to another round of questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And from Annie, as you had another red hat.
Thank you. Idahosa Akpata from 87 Engineering. This is going to Sherry. I know she has hyped EcoDisco, but although I think that the reason I would have raised my hand up, but I think what had switched the conversation from them not wanting the estimated bills is the fact that they now have it's a similarly more cost-reflective tariff and everything. I don't think if that was in place, I think it would have been a good thing to be on the estimated side. But apart from that, EcoDisco often faces constrained capacity and billing challenges. What specific commercial or tariff mechanisms could EcoDisco offer to reliably offtake power from gas, from small gas to power plants fed by captured flare gas?
Could you could you say that question again?
Okay.
Sorry.
I said EcoDisco often faces some challenges like constrained capacity. Well, more
Constrained capacity.
Yeah, we can look at it more from the infrastructure side and billing challenges. What specific commercial or tariff mechanisms could EcoDisco offer to reliably offtake power from small gas to power plants fed by captured flare gas? Although she had also mentioned something, well, in passing about ECO-owned IPPs. How is that synergized? For example, if we bought an anchor customer, what paperwork and timeline are we looking at, per se?
Okay. Thank you for that. We've got one more question in the blue shirt.
All right, thank you very much. So I just wanted to ask questions around the metering testing that you mentioned. Yeah, I noticed that you highlighted some of the challenges that you as a DISCOs are facing in terms of, so I just wanted to know what other things or what other kind of vendor or business model arrangements you've put in place to ensure that, okay, the challenges are there. Of course, one of the reasons why we have challenges is to also find a way to come up with an innovative way to solve that solution. So what other things have you guys put in place? Because if you really want to tell us that the DISCOs are much interested in metering everybody, so we need to sort of understand what you guys are putting in place, aside from the government interventions or whatever it is. So let us know what you guys are putting in place to ensure, because metering is one of the major aspects to ensure that, so we just want to know maybe what you guys have put in place generally to solve those challenges and ensure that everybody is metered.
And I apologize for delaying this metering conversation. Let's pick that one up. Are there any other questions before we come back to the panel? All right, great. So maybe you can just address the metering question and then we can move on.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll bring us back to. So in terms of metering again, I speak for EcoDisco. We're at a good place when it comes to metering and all that with this challenge. So when I was speaking about metering, I was not even talking about the government schemes at all. The government schemes are just more complementary to what we have in place and all that. So of course there are different funding mixes when it comes to metering. I mean, metering is not free for anyone and all that. From the meter itself to even the installation, and the accessories, it's not free. So of course you have we have even whether it's 100% funded by the discos, to whether it's a partnership between the discos and the vendors that put the money in place, and then we come up with how they will get the funding back. They are 50% or whatever reach back to them, and then you have the other one when it has to do with customers pre-funding, and then customers now get their funds back, through credits and all that. So again, these are just more in-house and not kind of government funded or government sponsored and all that. So, I mean, there are different things. Now, again, I speak for EcoDisco. I don't know for other discos as well, but I know, I mean, Ikeja too has some other more, funding mixes as well in order to get their metering in place.
Excellent.
Related to, I think you mentioned the IPPs. And so I think your question was more, how long would it take if an IPP kind of came on board? Operationalize. Okay. So with that, I mean, I would actually leave that. You can come and get my card, and I can link you up with our legal team and our we have a power procurement team and all that. So I kind of will deal with that. But of course, I mean, one size does not fit all, depending on what you're bringing in place, depending on, I mean, the different factors and all of that. Okay, thank you.
All right, great. To kind of bring us back to the topic at hand, during the pre-work for this session, we looked at the different countries that flare gas the most. And it's not surprising that Nigeria is in the top 10%, actually top 10 globally for countries that flare gas. And interestingly enough, the rest of the countries that do flare gas, United States, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Algeria, Mexico, Libya, Venezuela, and Nigeria, that as a list. Most, if not all of them, have 100% electricity access or close to it. We're at 50%. We're still struggling to find our way out of this conundrum. So maybe, Dantala, from your perspective, what are the 3 or so things that the government can do, or government, private sector, or any interested party can do to help solve this challenge?
So firstly, the government and industry can accelerate the completion of midstream while still using modular strategies such as the trucking and CNG. That's one. 2 would be blended financing, so government and financiers, which would be blended finance, where you also get investors to come in and complete or at least for the payment to alleviate the bills for the government. And lastly would be strengthening market signals through reliable pricing and regulations. I think those are things that would also help unlock a lot of the issues we're facing right now. Also keep in mind that it's a new territory for us as well. So we're learning as we're going in this space as well.
There's the trucking CNG is one that the infrastructure is not quite there from as far as the road setup and all of that. Are there other places that have set a CNG system up that has worked? I'm just, if you know any other top of your head.
So we're going to look at this case by case. So not everything is pipeline, not everything will be CNG, mini LNG. You have to look at what fits best there. That's what I would say.
Okay. Then I guess from the work I've done in the sector, from Ministry of Power to next year to the various programs, NIAF and MPSV that I've worked on quite closely, there's always been this conversation around gas pipelines get vandalized because they're running parallel with oil pipelines. And there's this unexplored field of non-associated gas. I know there are cost constraints in exploring those fields. Is that something that's already happening with the new act, or is that something that's still not really being touched?
So with the non-associated gas fields, what we actually did, and it's still ongoing right now, is like a study, more or less. It's just because you find a lot of developers don't want to develop assets where you don't have any uptake or any bankable solution around you. So it's more or less just there. So what we did is that we just off the books, we also did with an external company, we did a study, more or less. And so that's something which is ongoing. And the report actually has been sent up to the EVP's office as well. So we'll get a further stare on that.
Awesome. Because I think that one of the reasons gas is flared sometimes is because when pipelines are broken, people kind of do what they need to do to get rid of the gas. Let me come back to the audience for the last time, trying to make this as interactive as possible. Before we come back to the panel, any more questions? Wow. All right, awesome. So, Mo, a question around what if Nigeria is to fast track flare to gas, what immediate steps should be taken? And I know Dantala has already mentioned some of these, but what immediate steps should be taken from a private sector point of view to ensure that capture gas translates to reliable electricity on the grid?
I wouldn't, I don't think I'll ever have any options that is just private sector standalone. I think all the options are going to, I'll answer the question a different way. I'll give some ideas of some steps that could be taken, and then whether it's government or private sector, I think we can always decide. And I'll piggyback on what Dan had already said. If costing was not an issue, and I'll use that as my disclaimer because we've found out that costing is obviously the underlying thing. So if costing was not an issue, I think the deployment of modular flare catchers, which are basically equipments that you put in a few of these gas flare sites that trap the gas, treats the gas. I think those are some immediate things that could be utilized, in the short term. The gas that is gotten from those, however small, can be used for power production in the immediate vicinity if it's an industrial zone. If it is much larger, it can obviously be sold to the grid. And that's a first step. Now, if the quantities of gas are much more than these small pockets, then working with either the gas aggregators or whatever, investment needs to go in creating the right sort of pipeline network to aggregate this gas for much larger treatment. Now, in much larger treatment areas, obviously you can also then have larger power plants that can either feed larger industrial zones or can go back to the national grid. Also from these aggregated areas, you could work with mini LNG, mini CNG to work on virtual pipelines. Again, if these are remote sites, using these trucking systems, you can be able to move this gas pipeline, the molecules to much larger areas. I think all of these will apply to onshore assets. If you have offshore assets, then obviously they have like the FSRU, the floating storage units that you can use similar technologies on those to be able to treat offshore gas flaring sites. So in my mind, when I think solutioning, I think if costing was not an issue, and we've talked about the different bottlenecks around costings, these are a few technologies that could be deployed remote areas, larger congregational areas, offshore areas in solving this problem. And again, it is my hope that collaborating either within the private sector or the government, we find ways to execute these sorts of things. That would be the sort of thinking that I have.
You mentioned virtual power plants and
virtual pipelines.
Virtual pipelines. Correct. Could you explain to the audience what that means?
So it's a fancy word, right, that we use in the industry. It's basically saying if you don't have a physical pipeline, how can you move products from A to B? And there's a company, Greenville. Greenville is doing some great jobs. They have like storage units where they have either LNG or whatever, and they have trucks and they move it from where they have it to areas that don't exist. So it's a virtual, meaning it's not a physical pipeline, but you have a system in place that either through trucking, you're able to get molecules from one place to the other. So that's the concept of it.
That's interesting. These modular flare catchers, are they in use anywhere else in globally, or where they?
I think even here, some of these, I mean, they're fancy units. Some of these are fabricated units in the oil and gas sector. I don't think it's not foreign. I think the question again is more around the commercial viability for you to build something. Where does the cost come, and how do you recoup the cost? So I don't. It's not groundbreaking. It's not a revolutionary concept. It's just it has to be deployed. So there are places I would like to think they have a few of those in deployment here, even in the country.
Interesting. Sherry, just based on your experience, what are the actionable steps again around that can be taken to, because obviously this is the power dialogue. We care about the solving the power issues. So from your perspective, what can, and as gas flaring is concerned, what do we need to do to get more gas onto the grid and like solving the gas flaring issues?
I think apart from what they've said and all that, you can't take away that costing part of that commercial area of it and all that, because again, even the government will want something with themselves 100%. So I mean that costing part is there. However, I mean other things that we know we can do as both public and even private, right? Is even just sitting down, even looking at the energy transition plan, and just looking at it to see how even the gas flaring can actually synergize into it. I mean, there's so many benefits that we can get from that. Yeah, the energy transition plan, tries to decarbonize wants to decarbonize the energy, the energy that we get. So of course that's an advantage that that stands up to gain. However, even with that, when you mix in the renewables and we sit at the table to talk about renewables and how the gas flaring can go down, it is going to be a beautiful mix if we can achieve this. So sitting down to even speak about it and implementing it, right? Implementing the energy transition plan, the climate change act, which is part of it, and even just trying to understand how, that future foresight to see, okay, if we're going to utilize renewable, we can definitely utilize gas where that renewable resource is not available. Solar, of course, at night, there's no solar available there. So that's when the gas can come in. And where everybody can get that energy security and reliability across Nigeria. That would actually be helpful there. I mean, other areas, of course, vandalism, that needs to be fixed.
How do you solve that?
That's where really the government needs to come in with regulations, with stiff sanctions, with stiff penalties. The government needs to come in there. I mean, again, so that even fixing that actually gives stakeholders, gives private entities more confidence to actually invest. If they know that they're going to invest, build costly, expensive pipelines, and then people, whenever or from wherever, would come about. Nobody wants to lose their money. Nobody wants to go into any market not being sure whether their costly asset will be safe. Because at the end of, and nobody even wants that when it's vandalized, oh, you now have to start negotiating with the government on who to fix it, how to fix it. No. So the government needs to do that. And now, as he said, right, where they'll need right now, I don't foresee, I can't imagine a partnership with, private and public when it comes to securing the pipelines, but I'm sure there is. And that's where, in terms of even just competency and all that, I'm sure there is, right? Where you can actually come together and kind of put frameworks in place and put some mechanisms in place to protect the pipelines and even other processing plants, right? So other areas that we need to even look into is even capacity building, really. Capacity building. I mean, R&D, ESG, you mentioned. ESG. I mean, even this modular, the fancy modular plants, again, I'm not in that upstream space. But in terms of even just maintaining it, supporting it, and all of that, all of us here at one time or the other, although we should be spanking ourselves, right? We all say that Nigeria's culture has poor maintenance. So we have these beautiful modular, modular turbines and on whatever and the different equipments there. But we need people to be able to maintain it, repair it, and all of that. So the different competencies are needed, and that's why today we need to just start growing them. Because if we actually have to bring in foreign, the foreign personnel, there's nothing wrong with that. But that also just builds the cost, and then of course, when it comes to even the return on investment, you're looking at something higher versus if you're looking kind of at local talents, right? It is a little bit more manageable. So I think competency, there's a gap for competency that just needs to be filled around that. I spoke about the energy transition plan and then just synergizing it. We spoke about policy overlaps. That also needs to be fixed, right? Is it doable? Yes, it is. But that also needs to be fixed so that we're all speaking the same language and we're all looking at the same vision. And then, yes, he mentioned that, I think it was Mo, I can't remember who mentioned it, but in terms of most people are in it for the profit and then for the people next. But that is where, I mean, we must realize that that's where either the government or whichever development banks come in and say, you know what, this is the way they're stepping in to identify locations where it's more of the people and the environment versus the profits. They identify it and they make it attractive to other potential investors to come in. And so doing that makes it more bankable, makes investors attractive for other potential investors looking in. So make sure that, okay, if this is happening and it works, and investors get environment is healing, the farmlands are healing, then you'll actually see more investors going into it. Okay.
That's quite interesting. I think what we've kind of unpacked is the gas flaring is it happens. People are not rushing to the space because of the commercial viability conversation, and there are not enough programs. There's a few that we've unpacked, but they're not going to be that that euphoria where everyone enjoys a space where they see that they cannot get into the space. So that limits people who actually want to get into the space and all of that. But I think from the energy transition point of view is a plan that Nigeria has to be net zero by 2060. And we also have the plan around by 2030 to be 30% renewables on grid. We also have other plans that say set very aggressive goals. So maybe just to get us out on this one before the closing is, these plans that are in place, how do we ensure, how do we help government set realistic goals to get things done? Are there pathways of maybe advising government or maybe suggesting to the people who are making these policies that, for instance, the 2030 goal with 30% renewables was done 15 years ago, and 10 years later, we have maybe a few megawatts that are renewable that are on the grid. So is there ways to help government avoid falling into some of these traps?
2030, 2060, I think that came from the Paris, well, I'm sure it stemmed from the Paris Agreement, where different nations came together to, to target, to put together some of these targets and all that. And Nigeria was one of the countries, of course. That, of course, as when you have objectives from your stakeholders, it transcends to management and then employees and departments and all that. So I think that is kind of how this one came about. However, for the regulators, which is NERC, we do sit down, we talk about, the different targets that they put in place. We do sit down with the Ministry of Energy, both from the federal level and the state level, to even just kind of look at the targets. And we kind of meet with periodically to kind of assess milestones, achievements, and any obstacles that actually comes into place. And where they need to adjust, they will adjust. Where they need to step in to clear some bottlenecks, they actually would do that. Where we actually have alternate solutions, we actually put that forth as well. So I mean, I wouldn't necessarily give you a yes, we would hit it by 2030, because you do need to look at it from a country stand, and there are different key players within that space. But I think, to be fair, a number of countries across the globe that went into the Paris Agreement are struggling a bit. I mean, it's amazing where you see 2030 is just 5 years from now, and you look at where you are. So I mean, we're no exception.
Yeah, and also I think with leadership's change, countries kind of pivot. If we look at what's happening in the US with they're essentially rolling back all their
Correct.
renewables to go back to coal, which we
Correct.
know it's more expensive, and we know that it's not sustainable and has different issues.
Right.
So I think that really varies based on governments. But I guess what our hope is that we as a country can realize that solar and renewables are important, but from the approach of how do you actually make them financially viable, we're still trying to understand that question. But I think that's why something that's gas issue would be, the gas would lead it as a transition flow, as it's supposed to. Dantala, any last comments for your closing remarks? We'll just go down the panel.
For me, I think just more emphasis on the partnerships. So I think this will be able to, we'll see clear headway with, government, investors, and just industry players are able to align, like I mentioned earlier on, how we tend to work on things in silos. We don't necessarily, it's not until afterwards we then see, this could come in, this could come in. I think that just having that alignment, I feel, will be a big step in the right direction.
You mean alignment across
the government, investors, and industry players?
Is your current forum that all these parties meet?
More just I mean, you have them annually, but however, just the focus is not that.
Oh, okay. Mo?
This is not the wrap, right? This is more so to the question, or is this my wrap?
Both.
Okay. So let me just coin it as a wrap. I think again, interesting discourse. I'd like to see a lot more action. I think there are multiple forums. There's the Nigerian International Energy Summit. We have a lot of forums, and it's the same thing. We do a lot of talking. We need a lot more action. Again, like I said, regardless of how we look at it, you picked on some themes. We're top 10 when it comes to glass flaring. Actually, that top 10 accounts for even more than 75% of the gas flaring globally that happens. I know there's some question whether it's been reducing in Nigeria or not. I know from last year, it actually has started increasing all over again. We need honest accountability from ourselves, private sector and stakeholder players, and the government. These solutions are not impossible, but we need genuity of intent in trying to solve them. We talk about programs like the Decade of Gas. We talk about programs like the Nigerian Flare Gas. If we really want to hit net zero by 2060, we can draw up a roadmap and have credible projects every year that we try to tackle to ensure that we're going towards that target. If not, it's business as usual, you know? Again, from a private sector standpoint, capital will always move to the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
There are multiple areas where investors have to spend their money. If this is a problem that we have in the sector, in the country, we have to make it attractive enough for investors to bring their money to come over here. So it's a problem that is a social problem. It's a problem that's an investor's problem. We need to find that middle ground to be able to create the right enabling environments to attract investment, to be able to solve this problem, you know? Again, my shameless plug is going to be, you know, I work with GE Vernova. We have technology that can be utilized once this gas is processed to be able to solve a more pressing issue, which is this energy access and availability. And I'm more than happy to engage in conversations across board with like-minded individuals who are thinking about the right way to solve this problem. I think it is solvable. It starts from conversations like this, and I'd like to thank you guys for hosting and the rest of the panel. And I really do hope we'll be able to take this conversation to action. So that would be my summary and parting words.
Sure. Before I come to Sherry, let me just ask you one question around. You've been with GE for at least a decade, right?
I've been in GE for a minute, more than
Too
a
long.
decade, but I've gone across multiple sectors.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have experience in the oil and gas sector, in the transportation infrastructure space, and power with GE.
Excellent. So just as the CEO and the president of GE Vernova, are there companies who have interest in this particular conversation that we're having?
Every company that we play with has an interest in this space, you know, because again, we're in the business of selling power. Yes, we generate turbines, but nobody just goes to buy a turbine to look at it. They're trying to solve a power issue. And in solving a power issue, gas is a fundamental part of that value chain that has to be solved. So I would like to believe everybody in the sector has an interest in this topic.
And they haven't moved ahead to gather and produce on site because of cost.
Well, if we take Chinedu, for instance, right? So what you find with the typical investor in the space is, as much as you would like to do this, if you feel that the commercial viability doesn't make sense, you either pivot to something that's an easier low-hanging fruit or not. It doesn't change the fact that we have a pressing problem around energy access that somebody needs to solve. It may not be us because of instant gratification, but whoever unlocks it, it'll be better for everyone, you know, and that is the problem statement on the table.
Thank you. Chair, over to you.
I think I'll just end with how I started. Solving it helps everyone really, and it really helps from, you know, from the SDG standpoint. I said it at the beginning, I'm saying it again. It touches on about 7-8 goals, which you know deals with us as a people, us as a planet, us as you know, the environment, you know, including communities. It touches on all of that and touches on that negatively now, but of course has that positive impact there as well. And so it's something that we should be talking about, and everybody has kind of a hand to play in this with. And I look forward to us really solving it. We solve this, and we use that same framework to solve other things. We have a lot of policies, we have a lot of frameworks, funding schemes, we have a lot of, schemes across, but doing it right, implementing it right, and ensuring that it meets that end objective, taking the lessons learned and applying it to the next scheme, removing all selfish intents and intentions is key. We have to do this for us. We have to do this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just leave with these two comments before I go through the quick recap. 30 years ago, so there were no cell phones in Nigeria, maybe a few. 30 years later, there's 600 million phones in Africa. Nigeria has 200 million of them. So a sector grew overnight, and they met the Nigeria that we've all met, figured out a pathway to make it work, and they've been able to solve their issue and thrive and grow and expand. The power sector is in the same place where we just need to solve this issue, because once we do, the growth opportunities are immense. Last example, if we look at MoneyPoint and OPay, 7 years ago, no one knew who they were, but now they're both billion-dollar firms. So the point here is governance and policies and all these things are challenges. But as this panel has identified, if you're able to create a revenue assured situation, people will come in to put their money because they know they can get headed out. And I think when I look at the gas flaring issues, there's so many ways to tackle it, but we just have to start to do and agree on a framework and start projects in order to grow, in order to make a pilot case, prove that concept works, and then hopefully scale it. Right now, I know there are some programs that are out there, but I don't know if they're going to go to the scale that is required. One of the things is just this interministerial conversation that the TA to the minister confirmed that's been happening recently. So hopefully there'll be more progress and more conversations in that space. I would love to see a scenario where we check back at the end of Q1 next year. We see the numbers have actually dipped as opposed to the uptick they have over the past 6 months or so. But on behalf of next year and TH, thank you, panelists, for coming. I know some of you came far and wide to be here, and it's Wednesday, middle of the week. Everyone's busy, so thank you for spending time with us. Let me call on the TH team to give the closing remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming for this edition of the Power Dialogue. I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you at the next dialogue session too. So if you have if you want to communicate with us in regards to this Power Dialogue or subsequent ones, you can just send us an email or reach any one of our team. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate you. Thank you.